Welcome back to the Bridge Plus Fintech Odyssey, and a very good afternoon to our friends who have just joined us virtually as well as physically here at Bridge Plus 79 Robinson Road, Singapore today. The Bridge Plus Fintech Odyssey is an annual showcase organized by Bridge Plus as part of our participation in the Singapore Fintech Festival Innovation Lab Crawl. An enabler of the fintech community, we have hosted and curated fintech events over the years and have planned our signature Fintech Odyssey in collaboration with our members and partners to showcase their latest innovation and breakthroughs related to the sector. The overarching theme this year is on the fintech impact. For the uninitiated, Bridge Plus is CapitaLand's flexible workspace and community development platform, spanning across 7 cities in Asia, including Shanghai and Bangalore. Our community vision is to develop 79 Robinson Road into a destination at the center of the CBD of Singapore, where international fintech communities can gather regularly to confer and collaborate as a community. We do so through our community development initiatives and thoughtful event-driven content programming to bring people together to make great things happen. We invite like-minded leaders and professionals who have an interest to contribute and give back to the community to co-locate and collaborate with us. Whether you are a leading enterprise setting up an innovation lab or a startup scaling up for growth in the region in today's fast-paced environment, we provide the community to help you succeed. We are honored to have your participation and look forward to an exciting day of thought leadership. We are amid some very unusual times, but are thankful nevertheless to be able to continue having this yearly event for the continuous sharing and learning with our community. In light of the current measures, please make sure to be masked at all times and to maintain safe distancing. This segment is a panel discussion on fintech innovation in healthcare, co-organized by Dr. Lillian Koh, founder and chair of the Fintech Academy. Dr. Koh has a long list of accolades, from senior curriculum specialist at the Ministry of Education and faculty member at the National Institute of Education, Singapore, to mentor at Temasek Launchpad. We'll now play a short video of Dr. Koh.
Thank you, Bridge Plus, for hosting this session today in conjunction with the Singapore Fintech Festival. Ladies and gentlemen, Fintech Academy works together with many wonderful partners in institutes of higher learning as well as professional bodies so as to offer courses with industry experts. And with the support of government funding, able to contribute to develop human capital and prepare our youth and our workforce to be future ready. We are pleased to have formed the Healthcare Fintech Alliance to galvanize the esteemed communities for social impact and innovation. When I was appointed international consultant by the World Bank, and in my role as advisor to the Institute of Blockchain Singapore, I've gained further insights to this call for financial inclusion, sustainability, and the more compelling one, healthcare accessibility and affordability. So today, we are honored to have these star speakers who has agreed to be with us here today to take us through the iron triangle of healthcare quality, accessibility, and affordability issues, as well as how the tech gap provides a lot of opportunities for us to fill and grow. So my sincere appreciation to this expert panel, moderated by our Associate Director, Jean, in order that we can engage you, the audience. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish to involve you too. Over to you, Jean.
Now let's put our hands together to welcome Jean on stage, as well as the panel speakers. Jean, please.
A very good afternoon to everybody at today's panel discussion. This is Nexus of Fintech Innovation in Healthcare. I'm Jean Fu, Associate Director of Fintech Academy Singapore, your moderator for today's panel. For those joining us virtually, you are viewing the live stream of the panel discussion from Bridge Plus Metro, the venue sponsor for today's event. Joining me on stage are 4 distinguished experts coming from various verticals in the healthcare ecosystem. Their combined expertise covers the intersection of business, technology, financing, and healthcare provision. Each speaker will be sharing their insights on today's challenging healthcare landscape, followed by a round robin where exciting topics will be discussed among our panelists. Finally, we welcome our audience to post your questions, to which our speakers will gladly answer them, time permitting. So please allow me to introduce our panelists. First, across from me, we have Ms. Somagas, Pathethon Partner at Ernst & Young. We also have Dr. Yong Chun Chet, Founding Chief Operating Officer of Good Doctor Technology. Please also welcome Mr. Pierre Robinet, Ogilvy Health President. Last but not least, let's welcome Dr. Monica Mittal, Innovation Lead from Access Health. Kickstarting our Insight segment is Mr. Pierre Robinet, Ogilvy Health President, a veteran and consultant in public communications and business communication. Pierre currently manages Ogilvy growth and innovation teams in Southeast Asia with the aim to scale the Ogilvy Health offering across the whole of Asia. So Pierre, with your expertise in technology, communications, and healthcare, would you please enlighten us on solving the healthcare affordability challenge in Asia and how data, technology, and fintech solutions can really help? Over to you, Pierre.
Good afternoon. So first, I'd like to really thank you for having me on stage today. The reason is because it gives me the occasion to meet in person people that I follow and that I read. I read their white paper because I think that all in common we have, a passion is to really try to increase access to healthcare in Asia, right? So to start with affordability, I think I'd like to tell you a story so we could just all realize how big is the gap in Asia, right? So like some of you, many of you, I have a helper who is from the Philippines. She's taking care of my kids. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I travel a lot in the region. I used to travel a lot and had to go to Manila. And I wanted to meet her son. And I had a lovely evening with her son. It was really good. And we were just walking, just in the evening. And I just spotted a motorbike. And I said, I love this motorbike. It's so vintage and nice. And he replied to me, oh, we got the same, but we had to sell it. And I said, why? Well, we sold it because we had to treat my father. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, my father got diagnosed with a stage 4 lung cancer. And the only thing that we could do to afford was to sell the only asset that we had in the family, this motorbike, which basically gave us just the opportunity to pay a bit of chemo, but of course not what this person needed at that time. That really made me realize the difference between, some life that we have and the life that these underserved have in Asia. So the gap is huge, right? And that also shows you how big, is the affordability challenge. So for someone like this person, trying to get 2 or 3 years of better life with kind of immunotherapy treatment would potentially have cost 50 times the price of his home, which is just enormous. And without counting all the indirect cost, this is always unpredictable. You never know when it's going to happen to you. And you never know when you need to pay such an amount, what's the health outcome? What's the guarantee you have to get treated, right? So the pandemic, of course, hasn't helped. You know, there is potentially 10% more people who have to decide between wealth and health. This is terrible, right? So how to tackle this challenge? Couple of things. And the way I like to break down this affordability challenge is quite simple. First, there is the affordability to pay, okay? So cost is too hard, people cannot pay. What you need to do using data and technology is to lower the cost of the care, right? Point number two, how to help people initiate the treatment, the cost of the first kind of steps, the first dose, which is sometimes too high, but potentially if it could be lower, or if you could help to stagger the payment, that would basically help you in helping people moving forward into the treatment, right? Point number three, how can we help through data and digital as well to help people understand a bit more how guaranteed it is to basically feel better? And point number four, that many people, I feel, forget, is a lot of people are not willing to pay. So part of the affordability challenge, there is the willingness challenge, the willingness to pay. And I'll tell you, I often say to my clients, and I'm working a lot in the vaccine space, the best competitor of your vaccine for, like, let's take an HPV vaccine for a woman from Indonesia, from the emerging middle class, right? That cost about 200 to 250 US. What could you pay with that? A Samsung 9, a motorbike, a Chanel bag, or a copy, right? That's the competitors. So working on the willingness to pay is essential. So to succeed, I think that there are a few things that are important when designing a solution, and I know that we will go through lots of solutions today, an example. What I like to do first when we design such solution with clients is to really think with empathy and put ourselves in the shoes of the patient, to really start by understanding what are all these pain points that he is facing and how he would value what that solution is bringing to him. That could be not only essentially like the financial value, that could be a lot of like, you know, ease his life, you know, try to basically bring him the financial solution he needs when he needs it. The point number two, I feel, is we need to always look at this solution holistically across the healthcare continuum. I had the chance to design an entire fintech kind of solution with Gojek in Indonesia to basically offer a staggered payment to women so that they can better afford some treatment. We realized that what we were missing at the beginning was how to tackle the willingness to pay, how to educate these women way before they even think about asking, you know, to the doctor if that is something that they should consider. The moment we educated more, the moment we invested in the prevention, in this education material, we basically have been able to engage with these women in our service. And the beauty of digital is you can just track and just bring people and just keep them moving. And last but not least, when you design a solution, to me, I think what's important is to consider that you need to always balance what is the healthcare and financial element and how this comes together. I was working with Line Capricorn and Line Bank, you know, the entity from the bank entity from Line in Thailand, to also design specific loan at a 0% interest that we could eventually give to certain type of people who need it and in a certain context. A lot of things, you know, needs to be considered. Who will cover the interest? How it's going to happen? How to cap the payment? How to ensure that the code or, you know, anything you give to this patient will be used just to afford this kind of treatment and not go to buy a motorbike. The importance is when you design such end-to-end solution, for me, it's always about like how to always think about bringing the healthcare, the care solution, the service and adapt the financial service to that care journey. That is essential. So I want to make it short, so I'm just going to conclude with a few things. All of that can happen, fortunately, because we have much more access than ever to data. Some data help you now, help some digital entities to do better credit scoring and immediately assess if we can loan you some money. Data can help, of course, in the preventive care a lot. And I think that data might be more used in terms of monetization to help people who are underserved, get access to better service for free or at a very, very low interest, and really empower them. That's how we will give, a better access to the care to people. And I know we will discuss more about data, so I want to just give enough time to everyone here on stage to just bring some case studies and illustrate as well their thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pierre. That was a very good overarching insight to what we're going to actually discuss at Round Robin today. We will talk about what Pierre has touched on, which is so-called the willingness to pay challenge. We will discuss what kind of incentives are going to be in place or should be in place to really motivate people when it comes to healthcare inclusion. So up next, to add on, we have Ms. Magas, Parthenon partner at Ernst & Young, to share her insights. Sol co-leads the healthcare and life sciences sector within EY Parthenon in Singapore. She has over 20 years of consulting experience serving a broad range of clients in the pharmaceutical, biotechnology, medtech, and provider subsectors from strategy to operations across Asia and emerging markets. So we actually had you at last year's healthcare panel. Now, tell us what has changed at the intersection of fintech and healthcare since we last spoke. And we're really curious to know, how have we progressed in terms of healthcare accessibility and affordability, especially with COVID becoming endemic? What has happened in the last 12 months?
Thank you so much, Jean, and thank you for having me here yet again. Thank you, Dr. Ko, as well. Always an honor to be able to be here and continue to collaborate. And thanks everyone for making the time this afternoon. When you asked me to reflect on what's changed, right, over the last year, I was thinking there's some things that unfortunately haven't changed fast enough, right? As Pierre was saying, that affordability gap remains, right? According to the OCDE, the proportion of over 65-year-olds who obviously consume more healthcare resources, the growth is going to outpace that of the working population in Asia. And we continue to have very high levels of out-of-pocket expenses of total healthcare costs in key markets in Asia, right? I think it ranges in China, the Philippines, and India from a third to just over half, just over two-thirds, right? So that unfortunately did not change fast enough. We kept saying already 12 months ago, 18 months ago, how we saw the pandemic accelerating the pace of change, right? And really innovation and technology just having to creep up. And we've continued to see a lot of that. So there are pockets of innovation, many of them encouraging, and many ad hoc solutions to parts of the healthcare supply chain, if you want, or healthcare value chain and the affordability gap. And some of them are quite successful. I was reflecting then on some of the segment in the ecosystem that I'm closest to, right? So my clients mostly in pharma, in biotech, and how their role may have changed over the last year or year and a half. And I think that is where I see maybe one of the most profound changes, right? Because traditionally, obviously pharma, biopharma, medtech, they have the mandate to try and help break the affordability gap, to make sure that as many patients as possible, or as many consumers, if we're talking about vaccines, as possible, access the right treatments or the right interventions at the right time, right? And traditionally, they had these big market access teams trying to look at some of these solutions. As the healthcare pathway becomes more complex, treatments are becoming increasingly more complicated, especially with biomarkers, next generation sequencing, personalized medicine, CAR-T, etc. Then costs obviously tend to expand the pressure on the healthcare systems, and traditional solutions are no longer viable, right? Now, technology, and as Pierre was saying, also data, does offer an opportunity potential to reach and to breach some of the solutions in a completely different way. Now, before the last 12 months or the last 18 months, the big pharma players had a relatively traditional mindset, right? They're amazing at product innovation, but not necessarily at solution or service innovation. And I've seen them embracing the test and learn type of approach and experiment and so on, right? So they are learning new capabilities, partnering better, right? Experimenting better with solutions with the patient at the center, and supporting different players in the ecosystem to help bridge the affordability gap. So we've seen a proliferation of certain types of solutions, for instance, medical loans, right? So short-term to mid-term medical loans or installment plans with new proprietary algorithms to assess the likelihood of default, with very low default rates that mean that there are some cases where in India, in less than 24 hours, a patient or their family can be cleared to get a loan for, otherwise they would have never gotten it, and they're probably unbanked population even, right? But with this type of technology and very low default rates, in less than 24 hours, they can access the treatment. Similarly, we've seen a rise of insurtech, right? And partnerships of traditional insurance players and pharma companies often providing the data that is necessary to assess risk and so on. And then insurtech players offering the reach and the speed, right? And again, in some of the countries in Asia, we see that there's bite-sized insurance now that is promoted and is sold even through social media for cancer care and other diseases that otherwise are very high cost, high value drugs and very inaccessible. So we've seen more and more of that. I think the fact that all players now, not only like startups or those that are considered more innovative, but also the more traditional players are starting to try to embrace how to play in the ecosystem and experiment, that will make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So basically, Pierre, and so I thought, the conversation started off very interesting because Pierre was talking from the demand side, the patient side, in terms of the willingness to pay challenge. And so you're talking now about the supply side, where it's about having, pharmaceuticals or other kind of healthcare companies shift from being product oriented to servicing excellence. So I think we will have a very exciting round robin. So please make sure to hang on till the very end. Now, so speaking about technology, innovation, and disruption, there's probably no better person than Dr. Yang Chen Chet, who is the founding chief operating officer at Good Doctor Technology, to give his insights. So Dr. Chet oversaw the operations and growth at Good Doctor Technology, an ASEAN regional digital health startup involving telemed and e-pharmacy operations, providing them direct services to consumers via mobile platform. Dr. Chet is a surgeon by training, but he also has career experience in management and consulting, as well as healthcare leadership. So Dr. Chet, now that we have a very great intro by Sol and Pierre, could you lead us into and share more about how tech companies are disrupting and innovating the healthcare sector? What are the challenges and the opportunities? And specifically, how are digital healthcare startups influencing the healthcare industry at large? And any of those in particular to fintech and fintech adoption?
Thank you so much, Jean, and good afternoon, everyone. And I thank Pierre and Sol for kind of already laying the foundation for, I think my approach is basically to talk about from a technology enablement perspective. And also I would say that today I'm going to share experiences that I personally gone through in terms of being a clinician as well as being in the operation space. So I think to start off with, yep. So just I'll just use some background to be in the background, right? So I think from a fintech and health tech perspective, I think what the common purpose is actually very similar. So I think you have heard Pierre mention about the healthcare access issue. In fact, Dr. Lillian was talking about the iron triangle itself. And you also see that from a fintech perspective, it's about inclusion, it's about impact and efficiency, right? So if I draw from the fact that we all start from a common perspective, if I have the next slide, please. Yep. So the fact that from technology, when we look at the fundamental technology capabilities, you can say that it is coming from a very similar source, right? In terms of the enablers. Now, how does this then play into healthcare? You've heard that because there is a kind of ongoing journey where we're not there yet in terms of addressing the affordability, the access, the willingness to pay. I'm going to turn it the other way around to say that for us to actually innovate in those areas, the actual operations of healthcare actually needs to be enhanced or modified, or in fact, we need to think about building new ways of delivering health. So what do I mean by that? If you actually recall the experience that you and I go through where we need to seek medical conditions, where we need to maintain our health, likely you need to bring yourself to a clinic or a hospital or a facility. I refer to that as what we call a facility-based model, all right? And in that sense, now that when you have technology like this, which is transformative and has changed the way we think about finance or fintech, imagine if we apply the same transformation to healthcare. Maybe can I get the next slide? Yep. So you see, I think this is kind of my second last slide, but this is where the rubber hits the road. The fact that if we can think about health services or healthcare outcomes delivered with what I call a physical decoupling, that means you don't need to be linked to a physical facility to actually get the health results that you want. Now, this is important because in also our region, you realize that the population is growing at a significant rate, but the supply of medical practitioners and talent in the healthcare space is always going to lag behind. So we need to find a way where we in fact should start to unburden medical decision-making capability and separate them from process or admin and let them focus into diagnosis, patient care, and actually being true advisors to patients. So that's on the healthcare side. What about maintaining of good health? So that's also another area where we have to actually relook the idea of what healthcare means, right? So in my view, I call it colloquially, there's sick care and there's well care, right? So that's how I look at it. And I always like to say we should already think about managing our health just like how we manage our wealth, because in wealth management, you manage your wealth before you lose it. In fact, when you have lots of it, you manage your wealth. So should you literally manage your health when you are still well before you fall ill, right? So based on this, the fact that you can think about instead of facilities-based services, you have platform-based engagements as well as partnerships. So the last slide, basically, I think just to leave it here for the discussion going forward, I think this is really important. You think about what we call the user experience, right? So in terms of when you think about healthcare, you would think that there's going to be waiting times, there might be confidentiality breaches, there's going to be frustration, there's going to be siloed. So I mean siloed meaning you have to restart your entire process if you, let's say, move from one hospital to another. Things like this, by right, should be offered a better outcome in the future, where hopefully we will have secure, simple, seamless, and satisfying healthcare models. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chet. So it's really interesting to hear from inside the healthcare industry about how operations mechanics within the healthcare sector has to shift along with the mindset, whether from a supplier's perspective, as well as the challenges that we face on the buyer side, which is the patient side. So I think that's a really good lead in to our panelist who will wrap up our insight segment. She is Dr. Monica Mittal, Innovation Lead at Access Health International. Dr. Mittal leads the Startup Alliance Program and Fintech for Health project at Access Health. She manages projects across 6 countries and works closely with regional fintech and health tech players to create affordable healthcare solutions. She is a medical doctor with a master's in business administration and an entrepreneur at heart. So Dr. Mittal, could you tell us what challenges do you experience while launching some of the fintech for health models across Asia? And how do you actually see these new models emerging across Asia?
Thanks, Jean, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I answer your question, I think my co-panelists have set the stage very well. I would like to take a slightly different angle for FinTech for Health. Today, if you go on any e-commerce website and you intend to purchase anything about $200, you are given an option of an EMI or buy now, pay later. Let me ask you, when you go to a healthcare provider and your bill is even if $10,000, are you given an option of EMI? Are you given an option of buy now, pay later? For most of us here in Singapore, we have some form of insurance. If you consider the broader Asia region, about 800 million people do not have any support for even basic medical health services coverage. About quarter of Asian population has no universal health coverage, and that belongs to 40% of the world poor population. Imagine what do these people do when they have no form of healthcare financial support. They would go back, they would draw on their life savings, they would borrow from friends and family, or they would sell their assets. And in some very unfortunate cases, they would be victim of loan sharks, or they would just forgo the treatment. It's the most unfortunate outcome. So FinTech for Health is essentially a disruptive platform to bring these digital financial solutions into healthcare ecosystem so that people can afford and access the healthcare they need. And that's what Access Health has been working for last 2 years in this field. Yeah, that's what I just gave a quick intro. Allow me to share some numbers. Can I ask the next slide, please? Yeah. Out of every 3 people who are pushed into poverty in Southeast Asia, 1 person is pushed merely because of healthcare expense. And one of the most outstanding number on this slide is the 75% of people who are diagnosed with cancer either face financial catastrophe or die due to untimely treatment within first year of their diagnosis. This is not a very good number to be proud of. It's a number to be reflected and to be worked on. And next slide, please. And healthcare is a lifelong journey, right from start, the birth, to puberty, to adulthood, to death. At every stage, you need healthcare, and every healthcare journey is associated with some form of financial journey. Next slide, please. Yeah. And at Access Health, we are essentially solving this problem by bringing FinTech into healthcare ecosystem. And how are we doing this? We have set up a frame. This is a frame of reference. I would not say this is the holy grail, but this is a frame of reference. Under FinTech, we look at 4 buckets. First is digital savings. Digital savings, consider it as a form where you put in some money, small amounts of money on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, and which are locked only for your healthcare expenses. The second bucket we look at is crowdfunding. Under crowdfunding, there are 2 subsets. One is mutual aid. This mutual aid was quite established in China, however, undergoing some regulatory challenges right now. But mutual aid has been established centuries old practice where members come together, pull in the money, and they also manage that money for claim processes as and when one of the members needs any healthcare financing support. The other is donations, crowdfunding platforms, which we have seen during COVID, during bad COVID times when people came in together, gave donations, and those donations were channelized rightfully for where the need was in terms of healthcare financing. The third bucket we look at is insurance, which my co-panelist Sol has already spoken very well about. It's insure tech. It's not only provides specific micro insurance, small pocket size, bite size insurance, but also improves the process by providing them digitally, reducing the cost of our claims processing and costs of distribution. And the last bucket we look at is micro investments. This is slightly difficult to understand, but if you have micro investments with an objective to support your health financing goals, then this can be done. One of such models we have recently launched in Malaysia, with one of our micro investment partners. And all these buckets, all these models can actually work with healthcare in both offline and online models. But for such models to be successful, the key enablers have to be in place. What are these key enablers? Standardized and interoperable digital platforms. There are a lot of digital platforms out in the market, but can they interoperate? Maybe, maybe not. Are they standardized? Highly unlikely. Digital IDs. In Singapore, we do have a digital ID, but in Asia, no, not necessary. Not every country has a digital ID. Have they been implemented across for different verticals, right from healthcare to your passport? So maybe some development we see. The other one is e-wallet. The third enabler is e-wallet. E-wallet means consider it as mobile money, but without having a need of a bank account or a credit card or debit card to upload money into that wallet, which Sol mentioned as financial inclusion for the lower income segment. And lastly, ability to analyze that data, which Pierre mentioned, in a safe and also Dr. Chet mentioned, in a safe and a secure environment to analyze that data and reflect on that data. So these 4 key enablers are very important for these models to work. Lastly, allow me to give an example of one of the most successful case studies globally. It's in Kenya. The company is called MTBA. It's now called CarePay. Kenya is a lower middle income country with more than 80% of population having no kind of health insurance. When MTBA was launched, it was launched in a partnership with an insurance company, and they only focused on digital savings. And slowly and steadily, they built the ecosystem. And today, the user can not only understand what are the healthcare services nearby, online, offline, but also use the same wallet to finance their healthcare expense. And it includes all kinds of financing. It can accommodate savings. It can accommodate remittance from family members and friends for healthcare expense. It can accommodate donor funding, which is predefined for specific healthcare expense. And it can also accommodate health insurance. So this is one of the most successful models which we have seen today. They have about more than 5 million users on their platform, and they have established public-private partnership even to take universal health coverage to the last mile. Yeah, I'll stop there, I guess. And if any of you are passionate about to speak on FinTech for Health, I'm here and you can reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Middle, for really kind of honing in on specific case studies and providing us with some concrete examples of enablers. So we are now into round robin, which is supposed to be very, very exciting. I have follow-up questions to all the panelists here. So basically, based on what you guys talked about, the challenges on both the buy side and the sell side, and so much fragmentation going on, what can be done to really overcome the challenge of interoperability and alignment? Because it seems that there's so much innovation happening in the healthcare sector. Are we going to see a lot more of integration a lot more partnerships being formed, or are we actually going to see a bit more fragmentation where everyone is just being specialized in a very specific, tech field? Any takers?
I can take this one. I'm not sure I'm going to answer exactly the question, but give you a perspective. I think data interoperability in healthcare is highly, highly linked to the integration model that government and countries are going to take. I foresee 4 types of model based on 2 criteria. The high level of integration or low level of integration, and the low level of motivation of the patient versus high level of motivation through the data. You take, you make the cross, and that gives you the 4 model. So, and that's, I think it's the way we need to think about that question, and basically any kind of solution would fit into the different quadrants. So if you are in a country that is highly promoting data interoperability and data integration, so integration of the system, and that highly push people through the data to motivate them into the well-being, to the well journey, it's different from being in a country that has not invested enough in the interoperability system, and that is not considering enough about how to motivate people on their well-being with data. So as a start, I think that needs to be, that reflection and that question needs to be put in that context. How far the country want to push in terms of interoperability of the system for many political and business reasons, and how far the country might be interested culturally and just socially to use data to motivate people into the well-being. I believe that everyone understood and realized where is Singapore, right? And that gives basically the difference between Singapore and Jakarta, where at the moment I was so surprised, if you have a heart attack in Singapore, you have about 75% of chance to survive. If you have the same heart attack in Jakarta, it's less than 4%. I'll tell you why, because just the reason is that there is no AED, there is no way your ambulance is going to arrive on time. So that is interoperability about the system in healthcare.
Thank you, Pierre. And I'm wondering if any panelists would like to also take this question. I think Dr. Chet, you have something to add on?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short, but the question that comes to my mind is like, healthcare is a contradiction, meaning you need to keep it tight and close, but yet you want to make it open. So the only parallel I can imagine is the internet, meaning if you think about it, who owns the internet, right? So big question here. So you have dominant players that are very significant on the internet, but yet you are free to engage with, whoever you want as well. And of course, there's the whole security protocol, and not trying to get technical, but you have web addresses and things like that. So if you think about it philosophically, what I hope healthcare goes into is a system like the internet, where there's standard protocols, but there's freedom for people to have choice. And I'll end it here because I don't want to take up the time, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to add, because you bring so many thoughts listening to both of you, right? But I think it's when we think about the integration, right? At the end of the day, in any of the big markets that we can think of, there are some of these big platforms that are already reaching, right? And therefore, ideally, many of the solutions might be able to kind of be a plug-in. They have extreme penetration in the socially, and they have more and more verticals. That's one part. The other part, if you think about what even Amazon or Google know about our health, right? That's pretty striking as well. So I completely agree that the key thing here is also to make sure that there's a regulatory and a policy framework that protects patients and consumers, right? But while allowing all that connectivity and innovation, et cetera. And from that perspective, I do think that the sandboxes that Singapore has been enabling are a good model to follow. And then otherwise you get to the problems like with the regulation of crowdsourcing in China, right? With suddenly everybody has to backpedal. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay, that's great. So basically we've kind of touched in terms of security, but also, data accountability when everything gets a lot of, integrated in that sense. So in this case, because there are just so many health tech companies popping up, how will investors assess risk? If they were to invest in a company who has great social consciousness in terms of healthcare, what are some of the considerations these investors might have, knowing that the healthcare profiles is going to change along with the risk faced by whether it's startups or any other healthcare companies? Dr. Middle? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. So for during COVID, we have seen many health tech startups boom, especially teleconsultation boom, and a lot of investment being put into that. The bigger question for investors at this point would be, will teleconsultation survive? And for teleconsultation to survive will it be reimbursed? Who's going to pay for it? Currently, insurance companies, few of them do reimburse, but is it under government insurance? Is it paid? Who pays for it would be a major question. So such enablers would help investors make better decisions to further continue investments in health tech. And yes, health tech is a booming market, and healthcare is booming, and we need more investments. And I would like to share one data point that out-of-pocket healthcare expense is going to increase to US 270 million by 2025 from US 320 million in 2017. So that's a big number. We need to fill in a huge gap. So yes, there are a lot of investments needed.
Okay, so to follow up on that, we talk a lot about how fintech companies are really trying to make healthcare affordable. So my question now would be, what can the financial institutions do to facilitate healthcare affordability, whether it's in terms of designing the financial products such as, bank loans or employer contribution plans and other kind of sustainable funding schemes? How can the fintech sector include the financial institutions when it comes to healthcare affordability? Any advice?
And my colleagues can continue, but yeah, so we already see, right, that biggest players in the traditional insurance market, as well as in the traditional banking market, have already started establishing alliances with these insurtech, fintech type of players or these platforms, right? We've seen that in Vietnam, in India, in China, even in Korea with Kakao. So I think, yeah, both parts understand that they need each other, right? One because of the regulation and the governance, and obviously the deposits, etc., and the others because they have the reach and they're nimble and they have access to consumers in a way that traditional players will not have, right?
Maybe I would like to add some to that, as insurance companies are digitizing. They're digitizing their processes big time to cut their costs. And that is one way of bringing better healthcare solutions. They're looking at micro-insurance products. They're looking at digitizing their claims process, underwriting process. For us, the frame of context is always Singapore, but if we shift it to a developing economy, the scenario and the context is very different. So I would say insurance companies digitizing and looking at more insurtech products, micro insurance products would be one solution like that. And the other solution, banking institution is very, very traditional. And for them to be disrupted is slightly difficult because they're regulated, highly regulated. And in such cases, microfinance institutions play that part of providing lower interest rates for digital lending as well as for healthcare loans. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
And I'd like to just maybe be a bit provocative, but I think it's a bit the role when we are in a panel like this. I think would be great to look at what's the future of fintech, what's the future of finance, right? They're all trying to basically get new revenue stream. All right, and most of them are trying to get new revenue stream from the data that they own. You mentioned the rich. they have this rich, they have an amount of data and wealth of data, which is amazing, right? And what are they doing with the data? They try to invent, basically they try to predict a few things, right? So for instance, a bank or someone like Grab, who is accelerating in loan, for instance, do you think that they are just expecting to get money out of the loan interest? No. What they want is basically to get deeper data, because then they can work with retailers to predict their demands. And then that's amazing if you can start to tell a retailer, like, you know, you need to order more of this food, more mayonnaise or more this type of things, because that's how you are going to make money. What I would like them to do is to be able to predict and help people predict what's going to happen to their health, because that's what's going to be a big game changer. How you can predict basically along the life journey, along this life journey that has been presented, when this moment will happen, how to basically anticipate what people would need when that will happen, because these fintech companies, these banks knows us very well, so they might be able to do this.
Dr. Chet, do you have something to add?
I mean, I was just thinking when Pierre was saying is, if TikTok can predict what video to show me after I see a cat video, right? Imagine if you use that capability to predict, you know, probably the healthy things I need to do. So it's about the fact that it's about risk management on the finance side. So if we modify the delivery of healthcare where there is new results and new data, I think new products from the finance side would naturally come out. So it's like a handshake between the two sides. So I think that needs to happen, and it's not in isolation. It's not about what the insurers do or not what the providers do separately, but can they work together? So that's my view.
Well, thank you so much, all panelists, for the round robin. Now, do we have any questions from the audience today? Whether you are viewing us virtually or if you're here in person, you're welcome to post some questions for our panelists. Do we have any? Okay, so let us just wrap up with one more question then. All right, so this is also for all the panelists here. Moving forward, how do you think that incentives should be designed to actually motivate healthcare inclusion? And what do you foresee as good governance or best practices when it comes to digitizing healthcare, whether it's in terms of data or fintech? What should be the key takeaway?
In terms of incentives, I think there's a lot of misalignment, and therefore fintech and healthcare models are not booming as much. So if I have to save today for my healthcare expense, thanks to Singapore government, I can put it in my CPF and I get interest. It's not taxed. Is it done in all countries? No. So savings for healthcare should be tax-free. That's first incentive, so that people would actually start thinking of co-payment. For healthcare providers, incentives are very low to go them digital. A doctor is trained to treat a patient. They're not trained to work on digital healthcare solutions. So those to be incorporated very early on in education and building that capability, digital capability. And lastly, providing incentives to doctors based on better outcomes. Today, we provide incentives to healthcare providers just for the service they are providing, but on better outcomes would be a game changer. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
So she mentioned about the incentive for the doctors. Let me discuss about the incentive for the patient, because I believe in this as well. A lot of patients basically don't adhere to their treatment, also because it's at one point expensive, right? How can you give them the incentive that keep them going and finally push them again in adhering to their treatment? I am a strong believer that even if the technology makes amazing, advancement, our brain is still the same for thousands of years, right? So we are now very well equipped with chip and, and mobiles and everything. Our brain has not changed. It's the same. And something that we have as human is our human bias. In any decision we take when we buy a product, or when we just act, when we do something, we are biased. We might be biased by others, or we might be biased because we think that that's never going to happen to me. And I think something super important in their healthcare journey. How can we understand human bias? So basically, we can nudge people along their care and decide what the incentive is when we nudge them. This is how we will help people basically unlock their bias and move into the care journey and adhere more to their treatment.
Thank you, Sol. And Dr. Chet, any closing remarks for the audience?
For me, yes, I just would say I completely agree with the last couple of interventions. And in terms of incentives, I think, of course, yes, we should be having governments and regulators supporting us, having the right behaviors, right? I think through the pandemic, we've also learned a few incentives that have been put in place, for example, to promote vaccinations, right? Both negative incentives and positive incentives. And that'll be an interesting area to see how it continues to develop, because ultimately, yes, I guess as a government, ideally, you would want to use predictive analytics to anticipate what's going to happen with your population, but then use incentives to make sure that they have the right behaviors, right, to improve outcomes, right, as we were mentioning.
For me, it's very simple, right? I think we need to make the results or the outcome of any process that you want to convince someone to come on board visible, something that they can actually feel or they can actually see. And to me, that's not that easy, to be honest, but I think that is key of behavior change. Yeah. So making it visible. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to our distinguished panelists over here, as well as a big thank you to all of you for joining today's event, Nexus of Fintech Innovation in Healthcare. This event is part of Singapore Fintech Festival 2021 and is proudly co-hosted by Fintech Academy Singapore and Bridge Plus Fintech Odyssey. Stay well, be safe, and we'll see you next time.